Today I am talking about You Talk, We Die, the battle for Victoria's first safe injecting facility by Judy Ryan. And obviously, straight off in the title, this one's a little bit controversial. It's very different for me. And it's obviously a non-fiction. It's the real life account of a campaign to basically introduce the first heroin injecting room, or injecting room, because it's not specifically for heroin, into Victoria, Australia. It was the second one in Australia. The first one was obviously King's Cross in Sydney. When did that come in the early 2000s? And then, like, many years later, it finally came to Victoria, and it's based in Richmond, semi-affluent suburb right in the heart of Melbourne, and with the train lines and everything that goes on there, it was just this perfect den of heroin injecting rooms. And Judy Ryan, I actually got to meet at an event. She did a tour and was talking about sort of the battle for this, and she was with a panel. She hosted the panel at this event that they held at our local library here in Shepparton, and they had a lady from I want to say Monash University, but I might be wrong, but from Bendigo, who's an expert in the field. They had a couple other local experts, local doctor that was specialised in drug training, and for the life of me I can't remember the last one. So it was a little while ago I went to this talk, and it is very controversial. At the time I remember the battles a lot more for the Sydney one, the original one, in Australia. And especially at that time, I was not at all open-minded to something like this. To me, drugs were illegal. You're creating a space for them to do illegal activity. It just didn't sound right. But once you get, a little bit older, a little bit wiser, which not everyone does, you can see that right off the bat. Not everyone continues to grow in their thoughts and change their opinions about different subjects. And that's why we have bitter old people that staunch and back in my day and all that. But I firmly believe that you should regularly change your opinions. You should adapt new information, and you should understand. And even when I did open myself up more and understand that the drug problem is a health issue, it is a crisis. It's not. No one chooses the drug life. I mean, to a degree, they do, because no one's forcing them. But there's so many aspects of trauma and circumstances involved in drugs, and why people choose to chase these highs or these things, the substances that obliterate us. There's so much addictive personalities out there, and mixed with with our generational trauma and things like that. It's all linked. And I think once you start understanding that all these things are cause and effects and different stuff, and myself, I have a massive addictive personality. I believe it's genetic, and that's just a personal belief. I've no reason to, I haven't heard anything to substantiate that, but it's, like, alcohol's a big thing in my family. We're sort of known for it and proud of it. I myself am not a drinker, but I used to be a very big social drinker. And so it was a thing that I think is a lot more going on. And so my addiction would be books. I buy books like nobody's business. I'm plotting my next book, buying binge, even though I've read like 11 books this year, which is, a few years ago I was banging out a book a week. As a slow reader, that's amazing. Now I'm lucky to do a book a month, although I'm slightly above that this year. But yeah, so that's my addiction, because I know I have that addiction personality. Before that, I was a massive chocoholic, like a family block of chocolate a day. So I think there's so much levels of addiction, and so unfortunately, there's gambling, there's alcohol, people are addicted to shopping, the thing, and then unfortunately some people are addicted to drugs, and drugs obviously are the worst spectrum of it. Actually, alcohol is the worst spectrum of it. I think a lot of studies are proving that alcohol does far more damage than people want to admit, because it's an accepted vice, but it is a drug. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not really debating that. I'm talking about the book. And at this talk, Judy went through her story and talked about it, and she convinced me that this was the right way to go, a heroin injecting facility. When she explained what was happening in the suburb, in the laneway where she lived, seeing discarded needles all the time, watching people OD, and when you understand this is a disease and this is, not a choice, not, people are just doing drugs to be skeevy and cause problems, and that it's just people that's life has unfortunately led them down this path, and they're dying, and they were dying. I forget, there was like 56 or something in sort of the lead up to when she became involved in this campaign. And when you realize it's a health crisis, doing the right thing and helping people is something you should do. And even when I understood that it was a health crisis, I still wasn't convinced that this was a good thing, because it's illegal, you shouldn't be doing it. But once I sort of realised and sort of, and Judy, even though I knew that it was important and I'm less judgmental, still had that judgmentalness. I don't know if I've muddled that up. I've had family members that have been addicted to drugs, and even then I understood and didn't hate them for it, but I could still had to separate myself from them for my children and my own well-being. And but fortunately those family members, most of them have pulled themselves through and doing wonderful now, and I pray that they continue on that path. But even when I sort of could understand and empathise and understand why sort of they were going through, and it was a health issue and it was not necessarily something I would choose, and I still didn't think these heroin injecting or safe injecting facilities were a good idea. I just couldn't get my head around it until I did the talk, or listened to the talk hosted by Judy and the other experts. And this is what this book, anyone that thinks this is not good, and like I said, I certainly understand, but read this book and get an insight into why these facilities are important to save lives. And like I said, then people that are addicted to drugs are not skeevy people. They're not necessarily bad people. And there's accounts of different people and different interactions where, the residents of this suburb that was being, constantly afflicted by the drug scourge, where they ended up putting the injecting room in Richmond, they'd stumble upon drug people injecting and they'd be apologetic. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to finish up. And, so they weren't necessarily out trying to do the wrong thing. There are instances where drug use, does lead to a certain amount of crime and things like that, which is sort of cause and effect. But once you start empathizing with people and start treating the health issue, then you create a situation where we can eliminate those other problems that are caused by the drug issue. And I think that's what really opened my eyes up to it. The purpose of a safe injecting facility is, like, the biggest thing was there was no longer needles discarded on the street. The suburb in Richmond, and it's a lot of other places. Schools and parks is where junkies sometimes meet, or often meet, if they haven't got a safe home to do it in. So, it's exposing our kids. So to bring them into a warm, safe environment where they can be treated, counselled, looked after with dignity. And they actually saw cases where it actually improved the lives, and people sought treatment and sought help and sought to beat off their addiction. And that would be a mixed bag. You know that. Some people would not do it. They just wouldn't want that to be saved, I guess. They wouldn't want to save themselves. And others would do it and, might not land the first time, but who knows, maybe they'll do it again. But what it did stop is a number of overdoses, and certainly less on the street in the area. So this story actually goes through all the political campaign, and Judy ran for a seat in Melbourne City Council, basically on the one ticket of wanting a safe injecting facility, and that was really her platform. And it was more just to gauge communities. So she did that a couple of times, ran for council, but it was just to build the campaign and to see who else was out there, to connect with people, rally support, and see how it went. And it was a number of years in the fighting, despite the fact that it came down from coroner recommendations that this was what was needed. This was save lives. This would improve services, but not everyone's going to be understanding or open to this, and that's just human nature. And like I said, I lived in that space where I didn't get it, even though I could see, drugs were a health issue, but I still wasn't convinced this was the right way to go. But Judy's talk and the other experts and the book certainly convinced me it was the right way to go. It's a very interesting book. It's a great read. I think it's an important read without, just read a Mark Lawrence fantasy book that I absolutely loved the hell out of, or, in my last review, telling you 100% recommend it. It's not that level of enjoyment or importance, but it's still a very good book that I'd actually highly recommend. And I believe, well, as of writing, I don't know how it's going because our state government's not great. There was plans for another one, and I think because that came down in the recommendations after the battle, and it's a battle. It goes right into it. Different people opposed, obviously, but there was a lot more support in the community that realising we needed to do something in this particular area, which was a heroin overdose and injecting hotbed. And that's the thing, they're not just coming to a town near you. We're gonna, put a injecting room and watch all the drug dealers move in, watch all the junkies move in, or whatever. They were there. They were, the drugs were being dealt there because of the train lines and the facilities, the public transport facilities, the nature of the place. It made it a good spot to do, and that's actually one of the quotes out of it. The people were using drugs there, so that's why they needed it where it was. But it was a fight. Even after they agreed to the trial, the fight came again to shut it down and get rid of it. But yeah, it's a very interesting, so it talks a lot about politics and different things, but there's safe injecting facilities all around the world in so many different countries now, and I think we're seeing the benefit of it, and they're not saving everyone. I think we all know that. They're not be naive about that, but if they're saving some people, and you've got to think that's a good thing. The catch cry is they still got to acquire their drugs illegally, and because they're illegal drugs. But we're in this weird place now in the world that alcohol is legal, tobacco is legal, and in a lot of places marijuana is legal now, and medical marijuana is something we're exploring. I don't want to weigh into that debate. I'm certainly I've heard some benefits, so I'll say I'm on the fence, but I'm probably leaning a little bit. I wouldn't make it legal, but that's just me. But yeah, so it's funny our nature with drugs and as humans and what we accept and don't accept. Like, we're all happy to ignore that we're like a good drink and thing. And I've heard stories that we've seen exposures of politicians on drugs and things like that, and it's like, but then they rally and and condemn this, and we want to be hard on that. So the hypocrisy in spaces like this are incredible. But I think anytime we are trying to save lives and treat people with dignity, it's got to be a step in the right direction. And I certainly think the heroin injecting rooms was a step in the right direction in Melbourne. And if as I believe it was come down in another coroner's report that they did need another one in another area affected by drugs, and it did save lives, we should be doing it. We should be doing it as humans. We should be, humanitarian enough to want to save the lives of other humans, even if they've made some bad choices or fallen into some bad ways. I think we should. So yeah, this is a little political rant. Certainly a rant. It's a very different book review for me. It's a very different book. I do highly recommend it, but like I said, not in the same way of the Mark Lawrence I just read, or Relief Shafak that I read, which are brilliant books on different emotional levels. This one, because it's a history book, because it's a history book. It's a non-fiction about a very important issue that divided a lot of people, and I think more understanding of the issue, I think people will see the benefit of something like this. So yeah, You Talk, We Die: The Battle for Victoria's First Safe Injecting Facility by Judy Ryan. Very interesting read. I do highly recommend it. I won't say it's a great book, but it's a very interesting and very insightful book. And there's accounts of different people's experience for and against, even the ending. They had people against it and their comments. They had people for it and why they thought it. They had people at the school. There's a school right next door to where they ended up putting the thing. It's a really even account, but they were battling for it. Judy was fighting for it, not battling for it, fighting for it. So that's the way it goes. But she does paint the picture of those that were the naysayers and gives them a bit of a right of reply. But ultimately, we got it, and hopefully we continue to have it. And if we need a second one or a third or a fourth and it saves lives, hopefully, we'll have the wisdom to continue to choose to offer to save lives as humans. But You Talk, We Die by Judy Ryan. A very good book, if not, as I've said multiple times. Happy reading. Subscribe and follow for more.